This evening, I take great pleasure in welcoming local artist Lizzie Rose, who is based in the wonderful village of Ardfern, Argyll. And you can tell I'm slightly biased there because I live in Ardfern as well. After graduating from the University of Newcastle upon Tyne with her BA Honours in Fine Art, Lizzie has exhibited her work across Scotland, the UK, and beyond. Her work takes the form of paintings, drawings, and multidisciplinary installations, and we're currently hosting Lizzie's latest work, Carbon Legacy, in our exhibition space at Kilmartin Museum. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Lizzie to share more about herself, her creations and inspirations. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Lizzie.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. That's great, and for a very kind invitation to talk and for your nice words. I'm now going to share my screen because I'm not going to have myself on the screen most of the time. I've got lots of images to share with you tonight. Welcome everybody to my talk about Carbon Legacy, a response to the Cursus monument in Kilmartin Glen. It's a multidisciplinary process and exhibition commissioned by Kilmartin Museum, and the exhibition is in and outside the museum and will run continuously from now until late summer 2024. There are also 375 oak trees as part of the exhibition, which next spring will be planted in Kilmartin Glen, but more about that later. Much of the piece has been in the process and the conversations and makings and the continuation of these as the piece develops. And there's a living element to it, so it is always changing. Carbon Legacy looks at how our ancestors' actions have affected us now and how our current actions implicate our future. And it's very much placed within discussions around our human-induced climate crisis. The subtitle for the exhibition is Inherited Actions and Our Influence on the Future. So tonight what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to myself and my work, a bit of context to the actual monument for anyone that doesn't know what it is, and then I'm going to talk about the process of creating a response to something our ancestors created 5,500 years ago, and how the study and awareness of these ancient actions impacts us today. I want to talk about the collaborative nature of monument making, some of the challenges faced in producing this work, and then I also want to talk about the planting of the trees, which is a really integral part of this piece. I'm going to end with a showing of the film that is part of the exhibition in Kilmartin Museum, and then I'm happy to answer questions at the end. But underlying the whole piece is my feelings that the present is the essential moment to enact change. And if there is a question that the piece asks, it is, how do we want to be remembered? So to start with, a brief introduction to myself. As Jacqueline said, I studied at Newcastle University. Prior to that, I did a foundation at Leith School of Art in Edinburgh. I exhibit at various galleries. I have work in an exhibition called Borrowed Land, which opens on Saturday at Kilmarnock Gallery in Bewley. And as the director of Kilmarnock says in his catalogues, our own health as individuals, a species and a planet depends on how well we look after land, sea and sky. And it is within this context of witness and care that I feel my work lies. I'm local to Kilmartin. I was born in Oban and grew up in Argyll, and having lived in various places in Scotland and further afield, I've settled in Ardfern, just north of the infamous landslide Jacqueline was talking about. I'm the mother of 11-year-old triplets who are watching tonight, and married to Philip Price, who some of you may know through sea welding. Within my practice, alongside my painting, I've been involved in a variety of community-engaged social practices, including being a co-founder of Ardfern and Creve Arts Festival in the early 2000s. I'm annually part of Art Map Argyll, and having been involved in various other projects. Some of the artists that influenced my work over the years have included Emily Carr and Caspar David Friedrich, and I would plonk myself soundly in the romantic tradition of seeing land, sea and sky as having an intrinsic importance, not as a backdrop role to the human melodrama that we all create. So moving on, this next image is from a previous installation I created during COP26 in 2021. It's called Sea of Change 79 and was a response to sea level rises and some of the statistics and ideas that we're being made more aware of. I wish to make visible the invisible, to give to try and help us understand some of the enormous senses of time that we need to think about, and to give voice to some of the stories and narratives that we need to change. I want to create opportunities for dialogue, and Carbon Legacy is the same with this. Sea of Change was an installation in Ardfern, both in the sea and on the shore. And I saw it as a way to connect into the debate that was going on in Glasgow 2 hours away, but which felt really far away at the time. And I hoped it gave a context for us and an ability for us to have the conversations that needed to be had. So to the Cursus monument. This is the only slide where I'm just going to read it out because it's the most extraordinary thing, and for anyone who doesn't know about it, there's just a few facts you need to know. It was created by our ancestors nearly 5,500 years ago. It was made of 375 oak trees, which were cut down with stone axes and then re-erected in a 400-metre elongated U-shape, and then ritually burnt. It's just a huge statement of intent and power, announcing our presence in this place. It's an image that needs a moment of consideration to think about. That's nearly 0.5 kilometre long. The scale of effort and collaboration must have been enormous, and the fire must have been huge. My first thoughts when I first heard about it was, how could they cut down so many trees? I mean, you can't just cut down 375 mature oak trees. Well, not now, we don't have them. And the effort involved, it just must have been huge. For me, it posed questions. How has this collective action changed our surroundings? How did it change their surroundings? What are the implications now from something that happened 5,500 years ago? The burnt wood and charcoal remains and the burning of so much wood made me think of carbon and charcoal and carbonisation and how important an issue this is to us today. I had a black and charred image in my head of the aftermath of such a huge ritual fire event. So to give you an idea where it is, I've put up a couple of maps and diagrams. On the left is an extract from the current guide map for Kilmartin Museum. So north at the top, south at the bottom, we're in Kilmartin Glen. You can see an arrow to where the museum is. The pink dots, not the top one, which is Carnassary Castle, but the ones below that is the line of cairns that you walk around if you come to Kilmartin Museum and visit. And the green star, which I've added to the map, is roughly where the Cursus was located. On the right-hand side is a plan of the Cursus monument taken from an excavation document by Cook, Ellis and Sheridan. And in this you can see the Cursus monument, which I've highlighted in green. It goes over lots of little dots that mark the post holes of the oak. And what was found when it was excavated were pits of charcoal. And this was used to carbon date it. The shape has given rise to many of the shapes I've used in this work, this elongated U shape. But you can also see here there are other shapes. I'm just going to use my mouse, which I think will show you a blue dot. There's a circle, which is here, and also an avenue, which is here. These are other monuments. These are ones that have been layered over the first one, the Cursus monument, after they had burnt it to the ground. And speaking with archaeologists through this project, they told me that to burn things down and build on top of previous monuments is a very Scottish thing. And this happened with this monument, but the Cursus monument, the one I'm talking about and responding to, is the first, it's the start. So the Cursus monument predates everything else you see in the Glen today, the wood predating the stone marks we've left. And it was the start of this Glen being seen as being special. And what a spectacle it must have been, nearly 400 trees being burnt. You would have seen the light from the fire right across Scotland, because this was a time with no light pollution. The glow would have been absolutely enormous. And remember, this is 3600 BC. So a searing light in a dark sky, really impressive and all-powerful to the people seeing it. This is the time when forests are starting to be cleared to make way for human settlement and agriculture. This is when we as humans, our ancestors, really started to change our surroundings. A process that leads us to now, a critical moment in our relationship with the planet we live on. So picture the scene, a raised area of alluvial deposit pointing towards the sea, running parallel to great sea channels and inland routeways to the north. Dense forest, lush countryside, a powerful place, full of meaning and importance to our ancestors. It must have taken so much effort to make this monument. We must have been doing okay. We must have had enough food. We must have had enough energy to make something on this scale, because this was collective effort and collaboration on massive scale. Now, I hope the next is going to work. This is a short video, so I'm hoping this is playing. I'm not sure it is, so I'm going to stop my video and see. There we go. So this should be a short video which just takes us over Kilmartin Glen. So we're the other way up now from the maps. We're flying from the north, and the Cursus monument, I'm just going to run this blue dot, I hope you can see it on your screen, is located here. So coming up on the right is the quarry, which is there, which is there today. And the Cursus monument runs in a big U shape, ending up curving just above the ponds that you can see. And over on the left, that's Kilmartin and the museum. And then out this way are the line of cairns out towards the River Ad and Knapdale in the distance. So it just gives you an idea of where this was in the glen. So to the name, I wanted to talk about the name first of all, because it encompasses much of the thought and the questions and ideas, and it really was where I started, and it came very quickly. It came very quickly from initial conversations I had with Dr. Sharon Webb and Dr. Aaron Watson, and their enthusiasm for the Glen's monument and for the mystery and spectacle that this first monument created. Immediately, the whole burnt wood brought carbon to mind. It's so much of what we think about now: carbon footprint, carbon capture, carbon cycle, carbonisation. It made me think this is really relevant, what they were doing, this whole sort of sense of a carbon footprint that had been left behind by our ancestors. And these charcoal-filled pits literally left a carbon footprint. The legacy part comes from the idea that we inherit and we bestow legacies. I wanted to get a sense of time into the piece. So we're gifted legacies. You know, this monument is a legacy that we have been handed down by people before us. And I wanted to get an idea that we too are going to leave a legacy, and that will stretch on for thousands and thousands of years. And this sense that we can change that. We have the power to leave a good legacy, a restorative legacy. So it started with a commission and a brief from Kilmartin Museum, and the work has been funded by Kilmartin Museum and Creative Scotland. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to the museum and the staff for allowing me to make this piece and be part of the newly reopened and redeveloped Kilmartin Museum. It's a fantastic museum, and I urge anyone who hasn't been there yet to go. I've also benefited from the support and help of the Woodland Trust, Trees for Life and MacLeod's Construction, but more of their involvement later, because it's very definitely to do with the living trees that they come in. So after accepting the challenge, it all started with a walk around the Glen with two archaeologists. All to myself, it was an absolute honour to be able to walk around with two people that knew so much about the Glen's history. And I was given a brief to explore the relics of the ancient past in fresh and experimental ways, whilst being mindful of the museum context and the potential for the Glen's ancient archaeology to reveal social and political issues that affect the area in the modern day. And for me, obviously, this was a way for me to connect it into the climate crisis. I felt that there was a real connection for me. So after the initial horror at the thought of 375 oak trees being cut down, I went to find survivors and hopefully their acorns. I always knew I wanted to plant what had been taken to replace those 375 trees that had made up the Cursus monument. I found a few acorns. I didn't find very many. And definitely not enough oak trees to cut them all down and have a massive reconstruction of events. So I had to accept that it was going to be a smaller reconstruction of things. So from that initial foray into Kilmartin Glen, I collected acorns, fallen twigs, made drawings, and planted the acorns I did find. Sadly, none of them ever germinated, and I had to think again about how I was going to have the living element. I thought about monuments, and this diagram gives you an idea. I was just drawing and writing and trying to work out what it was that I thought was important about this monument. And a lot of it was to do with what monuments are, to do with time, and to do with collective action. So I started playing with acorns, the ones I found, the cups, the empty cups I found on the ground. I held a 5,500-year-old stone axe. It was amazing. I was given a chance to do that. And this might have been one of the axes that cut down those trees. And again, to think that that was how they'd done it. There were no chainsaws, there were no vehicles. It was just sheer power and persistence. I talked to lots of people and very few people seemed to know about this monument, so it made it very exciting. There was real buzz when I talked to people about it. People wanted to know more. Some of these images don't appear in the exhibition. They're just things that I've used, but the one on the left, bottom left, is an image that is in the exhibition. And I used acorn cups to try and recreate the plan of the monument and just to try and get a feel for shape and size and space. In order to draw the oak trees and write about what I was feeling and thinking, I wanted to make sure my materials were relevant and thought about it. So I started making charcoal and making ink and drawing with it. I found this a deeply connected process, and it started me thinking about our relationship with fire and our troubled connection with combustion and carbonisation. I continued to visit the Glen, finding oak trees, and I drew and wrote and tried to distill the ideas and thoughts and conversations I was having. Some of these images are in the exhibition, some of them aren't. Some of them are just thoughts and notes for another time. These two drawings are in the exhibition. The one on the left, I focused on an oak tree overlooking the quarry. The writing in the branches are meanderings and thoughts, notes on what I was seeing and what had been, and the fire. The right-hand drawing was part of an initial idea to present my thoughts like a book, as a story, to be explicit about it being a narrative I wanted to change. I had page 1. It was also when I'd just heard the word monumentality, which is just a great word. And I think they're both just meditations on fire, people, words, and power, and the stories we tell ourselves. So in this image, this is in my studio where I'm sitting just now with the drawings, and with each aspect of the piece, as it was growing and I was developing it, I had to think about how it was going to work in a museum context as an exhibition as well as a process. Materials felt important. I couldn't keep banging on about the climate crisis and our carbon footprint without thinking about how this came into this piece. So I chose with the drawings to scour the charity shops in Oban and just buy up lots of second-hand frames that were lying around in baskets in charity shops and to upcycle these. So they were all this big hodgepodge of shapes and sizes, but I finished them all in the same way. And this is how they're presented in the exhibition using these frames. I wanted to mention a book that had become a central guide to this piece of work, and it's called the Carbon Almanac. I've referenced it at the end if anyone's interested. I can't recommend this enough for hard facts backed up by evidence. And in this, there is a section talking about the tyranny of convenience. And this really appealed to me because some elements of this process and other pieces that I've done have been super laborious, and there is a continued maintenance element to the work that requires my and other continued attention throughout the piece. This was the same, for instance, with Sea of Change, the piece I showed you at the beginning in the sea, where I had to continually go into the sea every day and move lights around so that it would happen. So throughout the piece, which was ever expanding, I kept photographing. I kept photographing each element, and these images became intrinsic to the whole. And they started to connect for me really clearly with ideas that were coming to the forefront in my mind. So I've included all the photographs in this, and I'm going to sort of rattle through them slightly with the ideas that they connect to for me, because I think it connects, and I can explain some of the ideas that I'm working with. So on the left, creating place. It felt like these trees, their absence, had created a space for humans, for human development, whether that was good or bad. And intervention, the land is so altered now. And this monument was just at that very start of us doing that, of us really intervening in the landscape and making huge changes. And monuments, thoughts about monuments were very specific to this commission. What they are, what they do, how they're linked to our wish for immortality. How do we wish to be remembered? What is our gift to the future? And I just wanted it to be trees. I wanted to give them back. And then layers, so many conversations, so many thoughts were going on. And I like the idea of leaves carrying the idea of coming and going, of decaying and bringing back to life, a carbon cycle with layers of meaning and relevance. So that's where some of the leaves started coming in. And then the middle image, I called ritual, because it felt like there was a lot of ritual in creating and burning this monument in my mind. And whether religious or not, there are moments, places and connections that are made that take us deeper and have profound effect on us. And then the vessel. This felt really important. And also I was starting to read about vessels and the idea of the container being the most important human creation. Again, I'll reference a piece of work, The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction by Ursula Le Guin, in which she believes that the container is the most important creation that humans have made, the ability to store, to nurture and to hold. And for me, it was also interesting to see that in a museum, there are so many containers on display. This is something that we learn so much about ourselves and the past through containers and vessels. And then these other ones, offering. This had a deeper meaning, but sadly got slightly distracted by the very large, juicy acorn in the middle of this image, which immediately made me think of Scratch from the Ice Age. And after that, I kind of lost my way with it, except to think it was a great image. Linear legacy, for me, it was to do with time and travels through time in thought and through the Glen's monuments. Absence, the loss of those 375 trees ran throughout from the start, and the empty acorn cups seemed to sort of point towards this loss of those trees. And then this last image on the bottom right, the way that the acorn cups, some of them are tipping over and others are holding upright, just seem to portray that idea of give and take that we have with our surroundings and with the rest of nature. This idea that we hold and are held by nature, the give and take of all our actions. And I also think that some of the pots in the museum look very like these acorn cups when you look at them closely. And the final photograph is entitled Many Futures. I believe we have a choice depending on our actions, and that gives many futures. It isn't set in stone what happens next. So I just feel it's important that we can change and we can make change happen. So back to the trees. The trees are really important, and they're a central part of the exhibition. Within the exhibition space, you can see some oak trees, living trees within a museum. I like the idea of bringing something living into a museum space. And outside, visible through one of the windows in my exhibition space, you can see the rest, 375 wee oak trees in pots. early in the project, when I realised I wasn't going to find all those acorns that I was going to plant, I had to change my mind and find saplings. A lot of the saplings came from woodland crofter Andy Robinson on mull and tainal trees, keeping the provenance local, which was really important. And some come from squirrel plantings in people's gardens on Craignish Peninsula, and a few from a school and a woodland in Buckholden. So all very local. Pots were gathered, a request was put out to our ever-friendly and helpful community, and I reused pots that people found in their garden sheds. Most gardeners have got a few lurking away, so it was lovely to be able to reuse something within this. And in the end, I ended up with nearly 500 trees in my garden, so quite a few of them are still there. And I hope by the end of the project that all of them will have found homes, but more about that in a minute. I then had to create a space for them. Again, it was, how was this going to be part of the exhibition? How is this going to fit? Andy Robinson very wisely said, you can't just put them on the ground. They'll root through their pots, and then when you come to plant them, you'll be ripping them out of the soil again. So I had to create a space, and trusty pallets came to hand. And I think I slightly traumatized Jacqueline and Julia by dumping a huge messy pile of pallets in front of their beautiful new education space. But I think now with beautiful oak trees outside, it's okay. One of the artists who influenced this work throughout it and was pointed out to me at various times was Joseph Boyce with his 7,000 oak. And there was a happy happenstance that this shape that I created, due to the shape of the bit of land outside the museum, reflects that work quite closely. So if anyone knows of that work, you can just have a nice little moment looking at this elongated triangular shape, which is a nice nod to that piece of work. So we have here are 375 trees waiting to be planted, waiting to be put back to restore something that was taken a really long time ago, and hopefully that they will flourish and grow into the future. One other thing about these, during this whole project, I did some carbon literacy training, and the Carbon Literacy Project is a really interesting project. I recommend for organisations and individuals, but as part of it, you have to make certain pledges. And I made a pledge to, once these oak were at the museum, I would look after them by bike, I wouldn't drive. So that happened until this landslide that you've already heard about, at which point I had to enlist more help from museum staff who had already been very helpful. The only time I've managed to go over it is now boat and bike, but I will continue to try and avoid using a car to do this. Anyway, there's a map here that shows you a bit more. So north at the bottom this time, and we're looking down at the quarry. I've put a nice arc of dots to show where the Cursus monument is. The sort of dotty white above it is the potential planting site, and I am grateful to MacLeod's Construction in supporting this, in allowing us back onto the land to replant these trees in a kind of mirror of the Cursus shape around the edge of the quarry. And I'm grateful to the Woodland Trust and Trees for Life, who have come forward so positively to help out with this and will be part of the planting days, and have already given a huge amount of advice and help in how to do this and how to protect them. So in order to do this, we are going to create small enclosures of trees to protect from the heavy deer predation, and potentially a section of hedging along one side. And the Woodland Trust are also donating other species, so we don't have to plant a monoculture, and the trees have the best chance of surviving. We're also hopefully going to plant some of the oak trees in the museum grounds to replace some of the ones that were cut down during redevelopment, and also to offer an immediate connection with the museum. So it feels like a sort of collaboration and collective action all in one, this planting, which feels really good and feels like a reflection of how monuments are built. There'll be more, I'll maybe say a bit more about how, if anyone's interested in planting, in being involved in the planting, I'll say a bit more at the end. So collaboration needs conversations, and so perhaps this was such a massive part of this project, were all the conversations I was having and all the ideas. So there were two other aspects of the exhibition. One are the leaves, which I started creating quite early on. These are thoughts and ideas, connections. I tried to document them, and the leaves felt like notes. Meditations made from burning and wax and printed words. They're made on recycled paper. So yet again, another cry went out to my local community looking for packaging paper from a well-known delivery company. People dropped off bundles of it into a large box outside our gate, and I set about cutting out leaf shapes, printing tiny alphabet blocks, words and phrases that were coming up repeatedly. And then I used ink that I'd made and wax to try and soften the images, and then charred each of them individually. It was hugely time consuming and very laborious, but it felt really important. It felt like I was really engaging with the ideas. These are now scattered on the floor of the exhibition, and it's very unstructured, constantly moving and changing. And I really liked that idea that there was an element to the exhibition which was slightly out of control. And then there are wall banners. There are 3 floor-to-ceiling banners with writing on, which the image on the right is just a section of one. These are printed with vegetal inks on paper. They're quite list-like, but I just wanted to include and make as many voices heard, as many conversation, as many statement and ideas and prompts. Because for me, monuments are about people and ideas. So it was really important to try and include as many as I could. And as conversations involve people, I just wanted to include a slide of a few of the people who were involved with this project in lots of different ways. Family, friends, tree people, museum artists, archaeologists, community, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that was involved. I can't picture you all, but you're all very, very much appreciated. One person I worked with was a local tree surgeon. I think he's here tonight. Rewilding expert and friend, Will Gowdy. As I overexcitedly told him about the Cursus and the burning, and wouldn't it be cool to find some wood, and blathered on a bit, he mentioned an oak tree that had fallen near where we both live. This led to a talk with a landowner, and then a talk with a tenant farmer, and an agreement to swap the oak for 20 native saplings to plant back on the estate where the wood came from. This felt really good, a reciprocal relationship with potential for such growth and renewal. Then came the tricky bit, choosing which bits to cut, measuring. And then I had another conversation with a different tree person who said, oh, but they're branches, they're not trunks. So any forester that walks into your exhibition is going to be like, why have you put branches facing up towards the sky? I decided that we couldn't check whether it was trunks that were originally in the monument, so I would ignore that bit of commentary. However, slightly to my peril, because as with the corkscrew nature of oak branches, they're now shrinking vertically as they dry, which is causing issues in the exhibition space and ongoing maintenance. So maybe I should have listened after all. Anyway, more help was needed. The oak was incredibly heavy, had to be moved out of the field where we had cut it, onto site, had to have attachments put onto it, which were drilled in by a rigging expert. So lots of people involved in setting up the next section. I had to find a site, which was fantastic. I was allowed to use Kintraw Beach, which you can see on the left here, which immediately gave me the structure that was the shape of the Cursus. So a long beach with a curving end, which basically gave me half the elongated U shape. I had friends help me put the pieces up on the beach, these huge bits of oak, and then we had to test the fire. And then it was like, how am I going to get these lit? How am I going to get all these fires that I want to light lit? So theartofmanliness.com was on hand to inform me how to make a flaming brand. So I recommend The Art of Manliness if you want to know how to make a flaming brand, and it worked. So I can show you some images of that later. And so in May this year, we had a making on Kintraw Beach, just north of Kilmartin. There was fire, there was power, and there was spectacle. It was a small reflection of the symbolic impact of the monument that I was responding to. But it was so worth it to just try in our small way to not mimic, but just to sort of create a sense of what they were creating and the scale of it. But it didn't just happen. Fires had to be built, and this involved many people, a lot of driftwood, and boxes of dry kindling to make sure that everything lit. In total, we had 14 fires along the beach, stretching 400 metres. It was impressive, but so small in comparison to what the Cursus burning must have been like. The weather played a huge role for us. We were incredibly lucky. After a brief shower, it then just became a night of drama with the most beautiful sunset and clouds. It could have been a whole lot messier if it rained, but we were really lucky. And people were invited to take part in this making, to be part of it all and to connect with it. And fire and being together and sharing the experience, I think it was a really immersive and connective experience for a lot of people. Walking with flaming torches, tending fires, talking, gathering. There was food and there was drink. It was an amazing evening. And carbon is everywhere and gets everywhere. And when we were installing it into the museum, I think we did quite well. We made a fairly good mess, and it was a bit daunting walking into this pristine museum with these large charred bits of wood. Anyway, we managed to clear it up at the end, and on the right, you can see them installed into the space. So a few images now of the actual exhibition and installation, the sort of bringing together of all these different elements. And you can see how the bits work together in the space. On the right-hand side here, you can see inside I've got some of the oak trees, and they're connected visually to the rest of the oak trees, which are just outside this window. These are rotated out on a weekly basis, and I'm grateful to the museum staff for helping do this just now while it's difficult to get to the museum. So this shows some of the other aspects, shows the leaves on the floor. You can see the drawings in the middle image, and then lighting was also important to try and connect all these different elements. My only worry with throwing these leaves over the floor was that the cleaner might come along and just soak them all up with the hoover. So this should be a short video. In fact, I'm just going to stop my video and hopefully it'll start. Here we go. It's a short bit of film just showing you where it is in the museum. You come out of the main space and into the temporary exhibition space. We pan round in a second. I wanted to show you that out the window of my space is the glebe cairn. It's the most incredible space to exhibit in. These are the trees inside, and then you look out the window and there are the rest of them, which you can also walk around the side of the building and go and see for yourself this beautiful group of 375 small oak trees. Here on the wall are these large word pieces, and this is just a quick sort of view down one of these pieces. There's too much to take in at once. I haven't tried to copy it. I just wanted to include so much in this piece, so it is something that can be visited and revisited, I think. And then the oak posts, there's something incredibly tactile about them when you go in. They're incredibly warm, and the patterns and colours on them are amazing. And they are still incredibly messy. I've been told by museum staff there are quite a few kids that come out slightly covered in charcoal. Quite the end of that. All right, never mind. So I just wanted to sort of draw together some of the main ideas from the exhibition. So carbon being one of them. The poverty and prosperity resulting from our consumption of carbon compounds is the story of our time. Our ancestors used carbonisation to make a statement, their monument. And it makes me think, what's our monument? What's our lasting mark? It matters what things are made of, our carbon footprint. It matters when things happened, and we use carbon dating for that. And it matters what we do now, whether we do carbon restoration, whether we carbon offset. It's complex. And researching carbon right at the beginning of this project, I discovered that carbon is all about bonding and compounds. This is how carbon is so prevalent. It's not on its own, but in its ability to bond and to collaborate with other elements, just like humans. And I'm going to move on to legacy. And as mentioned initially, legacy is both an inherited from the past and gifted to the future. And they're linked. They're linked by now. And I suppose my hope is that we can regain the wish to be good ancestors and to leave a positive legacy. And that through this, we have a direct connection to the future and to our descendants. Ideas of time have run through all of this, of long time, that what went before matters, and the actions of our ancestors 5,500 years ago still affect us now. And so our actions now will affect the millennia to come, not just the next generation or two. I think also with time, I think it's really important to look at non-human lifespans. It's not so many lifespans in tree lifespans. Since the Cursus monument, it's maybe only the life of 8 oak trees. And we need to be thinking and taking time to think about our actions and how they can change and how long they will affect into the future. And monuments. This is where it all started, with a commission to respond to the prehistoric in the Glen. Monuments are human interventions in the world. They stamp our mark with positive and negative implications. And I just think we should be thinking about how a current monument should be. Is it still a statement of power and recognition, or is it ephemeral, or is it restorative? The human condition seems to be linked to monuments, leaving behind a mark, wanting to be remembered. Monuments announce to the future what we thought was important. And it requires us a need for these to change as our knowledge and our understanding grows. Monumentality is about life and death, collective memory, and is deeply symbolic. Monuments may bring groups of people together, creating community ritual, and in collective action of making, observing, and gathering. They can also remind us of a time when we thought differently, how things have changed, and maybe are a reminder that things can and should change. Monuments tend to be collective in their nature, in construction or in thought, but thoughts change, and so too should our monuments. We stand between past and future on the tipping point that is now, and pose the questions, how do we want to be remembered, and can we become good ancestors? I'm going to finish with a quotation from Rebecca Solnit's book, Whose Story Is It Anyway? So we have not arrived at a state of perfect enlightenment, because there is more change to come, more that we do not recognise that will be revealed. I have learnt so much, and I have so much to learn. I want to finish by playing the film that's in the current exhibition, and it's accompanied by a piece of music by Hannah Bowden called On the Story Goes. So it's about 3 minutes long, so I'm just going to put my video off because I think that affects how it plays, and please just enjoy the film. It'll be about 3 minutes long, and then I'll come back for questions, if that's all right. So hopefully this will work. So I'm just going to put an image up on the screen just now. It's just obviously been a huge process creating Carbon Legacy. It's been massively collaborative with organisations and individuals. So I've just written on here a few thank yous. I just also wanted to say that there will be volunteer opportunities to be part of the collective action of planting the trees in Kilmartin Glen in March 2024. These will be advertised through the Kilmartin website and through my own website and social media, probably either late this year or early next year. So please, if you feel that you'd like to come along and be part of that. And I've put a few links on here if people are interested in some of the organisations and the projects like Carbon Literacy and the Carbon Almanac. So yeah, it's just a few things. So thank you very much for coming along. Thank you to Kilmartin for inviting me to do the talk. And yeah, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, I hope, if I can.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. That was great. And if you haven't been to this fabulous exhibition, and I really do recommend that you go and see it, that you can still visit it at the museum. The museum's open until 23rd of December from Thursday to Sunday, from 11 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And you can still get to Kilmartin via Loch Gilphead and via Inverary. Access is open that way. So you can come and visit then. And also, although we'll be closing in January and February, the museum opens to 7 days a week in March. So make sure that you get a chance to go and see it then. And I think that Sharon's going to run the question session for me. Thank you, Sharon.
So we have a question from Margaret B. Margaret, would you like to just read your question out yourself?
Yes, will do. First, thanks ever so much for a really interesting talk this evening, and looks like a really fabulous exhibition. Unfortunately, we won't be up there until springtime, I think. But yeah, the question, and it's really not about the modern day thing. I'm trying warping back, and I don't know if it's something you'd know or something that the archaeologists might have a feeling for. Looking at the original Cursus, when the burning was done, is it known at the time whether they were just burnt and left in situ, or was the ashes or charcoal or whatever taken away and used for something else, or was it more likely simply done for the powerful impression, visual impression of the thing at the time?
Sharon, you might be better to answer that one, I think.
Yeah, I'll have a go, Lizzie, but sorry, I should say thank you so much for your talk, actually, although I was quite heavily involved in the exhibition. It's really nice to have heard it all kind of packaged so beautifully in one, because that was a long series of conversations and interactions and things that happened over the course of, well, a really long period of time, actually. Yes, Margaret, I think we don't know whether they took the charcoal away, whether they used the charcoal, but I think the residue of that monument was known about for 1,000 years, probably more, because layers of monuments that happened after that were definitely respecting the monument. So, but it would be impossible to know whether they'd taken charcoal and used it anywhere else, unfortunately.
They did find, didn't they, those dots are post holes that were full of carbonised wood. So that was how they know the shape and what was there. So that was still there, wasn't it? It was, and that was burnt right through to the core wood. So it was some fire, you know. We had those fires, and it just tickled the edges of the oak that we had. So it was a massive fire, wasn't it?
Yeah, yes, it was, and you kind of think about how long. You kept those fires burning, Lizzie. They might have kept them burning for days on end. So certainly the charred wood was still there. Yeah. looking to see. I can't see any other questions in the chat. Actually, does anybody have any other questions they want to pop it in the chat or stick a hand up or? Oh, Amy Jane Beer.
Hello. Thank you, Lizzie. That was amazing. I was was up in Kilmartin a few weeks ago and was lucky enough to see your exhibition, and it absolutely dazzled me. So thank you for that. This is probably a very ignorant question, but just thinking about charcoal, is it possible to date charcoal using dendrochronology, so you could know sort of when those trees, anything about what those, the environment was like when those trees were growing? Can you tell anything about their life from the charcoal remains?
Well, certainly it was carbon dated using that carbon, but I'm not sure how much more they found out about the actual trees at the time. Sharon, again, that's quite a sort of archaeological question, I think. It's all right, it's good, but I think I'm out my depth at this point.
I was wondering if the rings survived in any of that timber, any of the grain.
Yeah.
There was it's my understanding that there wasn't enough of the wood left to get dendrochronology sample of the tree itself, but I think there's other work been done at slightly later dates, and so around about the same time, about what the landscape might have looked like in the neighbouring Kilmartin Glen, actually from environmental sampling, which has shown that the landscape would have been wooded, not surprisingly, with oak trees and other trees as well at that time, but there were also fields were cleared, areas were cleared for farming. So there's a kind of palimpsest of kind of pieces of archaeological information to help us to try and understand what the landscape looked like a little bit. But there's a lot more research that could be done to help us with that.
What a gift. Thank you.
Thank you.
Got Susie Sawwine is asking, oh, sorry, it's just a comment, actually, not a question. Yeah, but it sounds like she really enjoyed the exhibition, Lizzie. And Sheena Rose is asking, she's saying, thank you, fascinating. Are you planning to present the planting as a follow-on to your exhibition?
Yeah, so the planting, it will happen sort of almost during the exhibition because of sort of time issues and wanting to get the trees in the ground before too long. We're probably going to plant them in March next year, and the actual exhibition will carry on till sort of late summer, I think, at the moment. So those trees, some of them will be planted. It will depend how many we can get in, depending on how many we can protect, and some of them will go in the museum grounds. I have a feeling there'll still be a few in my garden at that point. So what I'm hoping is that I can keep the sort of exhibition side of it still sort of stocked with oak trees, and then maybe right at the end to try and get them planted in the glen, in places where they can be secure. So I'm hoping I can kind of, because I have got so many actually, that I can juggle the two, but make sure that they all end up, as a kind of legacy for the exhibition. Yeah, I think.
There's someone called Silva. I don't know who that is actually, saying that was amazingly brilliant. It is an amazing exhibition. She's not wrong there. Debbie's saying she saw the exhibition. She was amazed. She had no idea about the Cursus. She's really enjoyed the exhibition, the talk. She actually found it quite emotional. And a few people have been asking if they'll be able to watch this talk again, and yes, you will be able to. We'll put it on our YouTube channel. It'll take a little while to get up there because there's editing to be done, but it will be available from Kilmartin website. Lucy and Will are saying, lucky enough to be at the head of Loch Craignish for the fires. It really gave us a sense of the importance of the ritual and the moment of calm perspective to appreciate your work, Lizzie. Wonderful exhibition. Thank you. It is indeed a wonderful. Alison Ewing is also saying, excellent presentation. Looking forward to coming up to see it. Someone else could. Erwin saying, "Good job, Lizzie." Don't know who that is.
That'd be one of my children.
Does anybody else have any other questions for Lizzie? Can't see any hands up. Lizzie, I've got one for you. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Joyce, would you like to ask Lizzie a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
I'm not very good with technology. Did you by any chance use oak gall?
No, well, interestingly, not in the exhibition, but lots of my little trees have produced galls. Like lots of them. Some of them have got about 8 galls on them, and they're only tiny. They're only sort of this size.
Right.
So I've been collecting them, and I'm definitely going to use them. So yeah, that is definitely something that will come out of the project. So I didn't use it in the initial drawings, but amazingly, a whole load of my trees have got galls. So
can I ask a supplementary? Did you also look at the kind of mythology of the oak tree at all? I know that 5,000 years ago is probably too long, but you know, the trees have had great significance and importance. Different sorts of trees have different meaning. And did you research that?
No, I didn't. I didn't really. I think I decided I was so overwhelmed by what I was finding out, and it felt like there were bits of it. I've always been interested in trees, so I have some in my head, but I didn't sort of want to go too far down that route, because I felt it would. I definitely was trying to look at some of the concepts I brought up tonight, and I felt like it was already getting bigger and bigger. I outgrew my budget quite fast and had to sort of go on.
It's really a fantastic exhibition. I'm really interested in this sort of trees thing too. Aspen is the one I like.
Oh, beautiful! Yes, very
I thought it was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm hoping to come and see the museum. Oh, just one more thing. You mentioned, I don't want to hog it, but the containers. We recently were introduced to one of the young men who restored a pot for Kilmartin Museum.
Oh, yeah.
When you were talking about the shapes, because I think it was in something like 800 pieces, and he managed to put it together again. And it had a kind of acorn look to it, in a sense. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, I find that connection fascinating. I keep bringing it up. I'm not sure whether it's relevant, but I like it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So there's a comment here from Indira who says fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
And Debbie's asking when the exhibition finishes. And because the museum opened so late, Lizzie, I think we were really hoping that the exhibition will run for the whole of next year, because we wanted to do a 12-month cycle, didn't we?
Yes.
So the oak trees get their chance to go through the 4 seasons.
Yeah, no, it'd be amazing, because already they've changed so much. I mean, you saw in some slides that, you know, when they were planted, they were just sticks in the ground, and they've gone through. One of the hopes had been with timing that we would start at the beginning of the year and seeing the leaves completely unfurl. So hopefully that will happen next year, and we can document that. My idea is that I will make a short film at the very end so that we can include the planting in it, and hopefully this sort of whole cycle of the year. I think there's a time lapse in there somewhere. I'll work it out somehow. But yeah.
And Dietmar is saying many thanks. The project's very inspiring, really inspiring. You must have been very busy. They're a member of the Carbon Neutral Island Committee on Islay, and they think that you've planted a seed.
Oh, excellent! Good. That's what I'd love to hear. That's great. Thank you.
Lots of people expressing their amazement and
thank you.
Talking about how fantastic it is. And someone's saying they love the smell and they're sure they got a black nose.
Yes, I think there's a few people, and there are a few marks on the walls. We were very careful as we went in, but there's definitely old smudge here and there in the museum now. So yeah, guilty for that.
Yeah, we don't mind. Margaret's suggesting that with the mythology of the Oak King and the Holly King, they'll have to do it again with Holly next year.
Absolutely. I was just looking at Lucy's comment. I can see them now. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen to the work. I haven't quite decided what's going to happen with work. I never wanted it, it's a sort of entity in itself. There is one more bit of oak, which is in my garden at the moment because we burnt 4 big uprights. I'm not sure. I'm open to suggestions. and I think it's just about the conversations carrying on and seeing what happens next, really. I think that's all part of this next year, I think, of seeing whether they've got a life past this or what I'll do with them. If not, they might end up in my garden. I don't know.
Lizzie, my question was about whether the exhibition, I mean, how do you feel about the way that it sort of unfolded? Are you happy with how things turned out in the end? Because there was a lot of you had so many ideas out there, and it was kind of pulling it all together. But how are you feeling about it now?
Yeah, I'm delighted about it. It's a bit weird. I feel incredibly disconnected from it because of the landslide. I'd hoped this whole idea of the trees needing looked after, and I would be going every week and swapping them over. That was very much part of the piece, that sort of continued involvement. And I feel quite a disconnect at the moment. So I'm struggling with that a little bit because, I would be in there every week reflecting on it and maybe having a think about that. So it's a bit odd at the moment. But yeah, overall, I'm really pleased with it. The room is amazing. The way that I think the whole museum is amazing. The way the inside and the outside connect so immediately. So to be able to do that with the oak trees out the window and the glebe cairn out the other window, I mean, it's the most extraordinary location, to have, like with the pot that's on display, where you can view where it was found from its position in the museum. Being able to view these oak. So I'm delighted with that aspect of it. I find that really exciting to be able to do that. And I love the fact that I've brought these little living things into a museum as well. That feels kind of nice. It's good.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. And for me, sort of what I really like watching people go around it. I think the connection between the end of the exhibition that we created and what you did was I was really hopeful that you would pick the Cursus monument, because I think that's brought the exhibition straight back into the present and also into the future as well. It's the exhibition itself has formed a link, I think, between Kilmartin's past and Kilmartin's future, or the whole of Mid-Argyll's future, actually, which I think is just absolutely, amazing, just what we hoped, because, archaeology is kind of pointless, I feel, in a way, if it doesn't tell people something about, or doesn't give people inspiration or help them to figure out how they might live their lives in a better way going forward. So thank you so much for what you did.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure and amazing to work with. Well, to go for a walk with 2 archaeologists on your own, it's like, when do you get that chance? And you can ask any question you like about the Glen. It's been a real privilege to do the project. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Lizzie.
Thank you, Lizzie. And I'll just reiterate that this will be available on video. And I was thinking how good it'll be for me. And we do guided walks of the Glen from April to October on a Wednesday. And we always talk about the Cursus monument. And actually, it will really bring it to life for the volunteer stewards that we have too. So we'll be able to watch that, and that'll be part of the training for our new guides that we've got as well. So thank you, Lizzie, for that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So if that's everyone, there's lots of thanks coming in, Lizzie, from everyone, and how much they've enjoyed it. So on behalf of us all, thank you very much again. And thanks to everybody for sharing the evening with us. And I'm going to take this opportunity just to announce that we've decided to continue our evening talks with an exciting series of speakers in the new year. So, which is great. I'm really pleased. Once we've decided on the programme of talks, we'll announce these on our website and via social media. And I look forward to hearing your comments and suggestions on your feedback forms, or you can always contact us on education@kilmartin.org. So again, I think we'd all like to, can we give Lizzie a round of applause, everybody, or a wave at least, so she knows we're all here. So well done. Thank you. It's been great. Thank you very much. Oh, you've got
Oh,
behind the names, isn't it? That's always my favourite bit.
That's nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And so, on behalf of us all, thank you, Lizzie, and everyone else. And we look forward to seeing you in the new year. So, good night, everybody. And I'd like to wish season's greetings from all of us at the Kilmartin Museum. And we'll be with you again in January. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good night.